I'm not sure how she got her position in the first place, but I can tell you it's not based on skill or deep thinking.
And I get the strategy there because, the White House has unleashed a wave of protectionism around the world that industries are forced to just adapt to.
Yeah.
But this is going to take some time, right? So what's the timeline you see for that sort of pivot? Where Canadian steel can be reoriented towards a defense supply chain that we're kind of just starting to build as a country, right? This is not the sort of thing, I mentioned the 30-day time frame. I know that's for countermeasures, but that 30 days at 50% tariffs for these companies is going to be rough.
Well,
the transition is going to take months, years.
That's why we have a One Canadian Economy bill. That's why we want to, people have been asking why this urgency of passing through this legislation. There is urgency. People will potentially be losing their jobs.
Well, Melanie, people aren't potentially losing their jobs. They are losing their jobs. And you gotta love what she says here.
So, people have been asking why this urgency of passing through this legislation. There is urgency.
There is urgency, and that's why Parliament is about to go on summer vacation. That sounds pretty urgent to me. If we take a look at the House of Commons schedule, it looks like they almost have 3 entire months off, starting tomorrow, and they come back on the 15th of September.
So we're fighting every day to make sure that we keep these plants open, that we're working with the unions to keep the jobs, to make sure, meanwhile, that we attract foreign direct investments in different sectors that are linked to the manufacturing sector. It's the future of jobs in the trade that is right now not only at risk, but actually could be potentially a great opportunity, because we'll have so many different major infrastructure projects and so many investments in aerospace, in auto, because of defense procurement. So that's why we want to speed this up. That's why I'm extremely impatient and not sleeping enough at night. That's why I wanted this job, because I knew that our people would be potentially at risk. And I'm seeing it all around the world. The most important thing is ultimately people having a job and their family being able to, put, like we say in French, butter and bread on the table. So that's why this is a first response to the steel and aluminum crisis. We will be working on other different types of solutions. We're really open. I'm absolutely open to make sure that the government plays its role. And not only that, we will make sure that not only the companies also do their role, but we will work with union, because this is a question of ultimately keeping the trust between people and their government.
Just as a final point, Minister, that sort of bigger picture restructuring you were talking about there, linking steel with auto, defense, and all of these things, conceptually, it reminds me of the conversation that the country had after COVID, when it was like, we can't trust China for masks, we can't trust them for medical supplies, we need to build industrial capacity domestically.
Absolutely.
And there was that shift. Those are more niche products than sort of like steel and auto. But if we do have to, as a country, pivot to this more of a domestic integration, seems like that is going to drive up costs, right? Because, part of the benefits of the trade order has been to bring prices down. I mean, is that what the country needs to prepare for and consumers need to prepare for? Because forced on us by the United States, no question. But is that where you see it going?
I think it's a very good question. And that is exactly what's happening in the U.S. Inflation is going to rise. And right now, on average, an American is bearing 20% tariff, so a 20% tax against him or her. So meanwhile, we have to do two things. We need to make sure that we continue to have free trade agreements with the EU and many other countries, which we have free trade agreements, to make sure, to your point, that costs are down. But in certain sectors, including, of course, the steel, aluminum, and auto sector, we need to make sure that we protect our workers. And this is indeed protectionism, because the trade war has been launched, and ultimately it's a question not only of protecting the jobs, like I was saying, but it's a question of sovereignty, of being able to not be dependent on the US to build things in Canada. And that's why we're coming up with a plan to build Canada, with major projects, with defense procurement. So it's all linked. I know for people watching us right now, it seems that there's a big complexity to all of this. It's the impact of right now the White House taking its decisions and Canada deciding to be closer and less dependent on the U.S. and closer to Europe and closer to certain Asian countries. And yes, negotiations on the free trade agreement with the U.S. is important, but I think we should all bear in mind that the mindset of trade in the world has changed. And so we need to have a Build in Canada plan, and that's what this government is doing.
But it does seem the prices will rise as a result of this, because security and self-sufficiency often comes at a cost. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing.
That is why we're cutting taxes, and that is why that was our first bill, to make sure that we can continue to have this social safety net with pharmacare, with dental care, with childcare, but at the same time, we know that things are costing too much. It's been tough. And so that's why we're cutting taxes, and we're working on all these fronts. I
don't think I've ever heard a minister use sound effects while trying to prove their point. Maybe after her time as a politician, the CBC will hire her because she's really good at making things up. And right after that interview with Melanie Joly, the CBC had a panel of analysts on, and this one analyst just absolutely roasts Melanie.
Talking to Melanie Joly, and you look at how they're talking about restructuring sort of the domestic market for steel and aluminum into defense procurement, maybe, creating components specifically for the Canadian auto sector. That, I understand the necessity of that, but that is then putting higher labor cost inputs into those particular sectors. It seems like it is going to make things more expensive. That's not a criticism. That's just, it seems like the natural outcome of where this reorientation of these industries is going to lead.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have a mixed economy, and there are times when the government has to intervene and put in some liquidity and to counterbalance measures that are unfair and frankly illegal from the United States when it comes to trade. But my free market, free enterprise, hairs on my neck stood up a little bit listening to Minister Joly's conversation with you. And Frank, and I don't mean this to be a cheap shot in any way, but frankly, the longer she talked, the more confused I got. The longer she explained, the more she needed to sort of re-explain. It wasn't clear. It wasn't concise. And I think we get into the dangerous ground here of government trying to be busy for the sake of being busy, so they can say that they're being busy, so that we're all reassured that they're being busy. And you get into the point where the medicine can kill the patient when you try to sort of overly inject government interventions into these things. Workers need support. The businesses need market access. And in the long term, we need stability in terms of what the nature of our market access relationship is with the United States. Those are kind of the three main components. Trying to sort of gerrymander the supply chain and guarantee outcomes and percentages and inputs, the government is not good at that. And with respect to Minister Joly, she has no experience in doing that. The government doesn't have experience in doing that. That is not their strong hand.
Oh, what? You're telling me the Melanie Joly sound effects weren't convincing? Now just take into consideration what this analyst just said, and now also take in the fact that she has been in said position for over 10 years now. She's been shuffled around from minister position to minister position, but that highly incompetent minister has been around the entire time. They talk about standing up for workers, but we continue to see jobs disappear and workers get laid off. They claim to want to fight for Canadians, but we still have not seen a trade deal between the US and Canada. Don't expect the ministers who didn't do anything over the past 10 years to all of a sudden change their tune and start doing things. She clearly doesn't have the skill, talent, or ability to be in that position, and we're seeing it time and time again. Anyway, I'd like to know what you think down in the comments section below. Hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new, and thank you so much for watching.